Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today. We're excited to have you for our PathLock Innovation Series. I'm going to be putting a link into the chat with our next session coming up as well. If you wanted to look at our schedule for the day and see if there's any more sessions you want to join, you're welcome to click on that link. Our session right now is Protect Your ERP from Cyber Attacks. And our presenter will introduce himself in just a moment, but first, just a few housekeeping items. To prevent background noise, everyone is on mute. And if you have any audio issues, please click on Preferences and then Audio, and you will be able to test your speaker options from there. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Arvind.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. You've been listening to some high quality presentations over the last couple of days and this morning as well. The focus yesterday was PeopleSoft, and before that it was SAP, and today we are talking about cloud and cybersecurity. But I wanted to take a few minutes of your time today to talk to you about specifically protecting your ERP applications from cyber attacks. These could be applications like PeopleSoft, Oracle E-Business Suite, JD Edwards, SAP, Microsoft ERP, whatever you may have. And this is not just financials and HR and supply chain. It could even apply to your CRM and CX environments, because there are a lot of sensitive data elements in all of these systems. So the agenda I had in mind for today was to do a quick round of introductions so that you understand my background and why I'm here talking to you today, a little bit about my company. And for those of you who are completely unfamiliar with what cyber attacks are, which I imagine nobody is, but I think a brief primer would be helpful. And then let's talk about the impact of cyber attacks on ERP, right? Why is it important for us to acknowledge this? It's not just about a leaky storage bucket on Amazon or some other cloud that hits the news that is vulnerable to cyber attacks. Attackers can get to behind your firewalls and to your core ERP systems as well if they are not protected. Then we'll talk about what some proactive measures are that you can take to put yourself in a very good position to fend off these cyber attacks. And then we'll conclude with some recommended solutions and Q&A. So I'm Arvind Rajan. I'm co-founder and CEO of Astute Business Solutions. Astute Business Solutions has been around for the last 17 years. We are an Oracle partner, but we are also acutely focused on using cloud to help our customers transform their enterprise applications. Over the last 25 years, I've been fortunate enough to work on a number of projects in the cloud, on-premise, in application hosting, in helping my employers and my customers create data centers and manage them. And over the years, I have focused on PeopleSoft ERP, but I've also gained skills in security, in managed services, in e-business suite, in Illusion's Banner ERP, and much more. So Astute Business Solutions, as I said, has been around for 17 years. We're headquartered in Dublin, California. In the last 5 years, we've done over 55 successful cloud projects. And the underlying theme of many or most of our cloud projects has been improved security. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in the cloud and why cloud can improve your security. My core team at Astute Business Solutions that forms our leadership team has over 200 years of combined IT experience. This includes industry knowledge, domain expertise, application and technology expertise, and we really excel in providing tailored solutions to our customers. We are a big believer in meeting our customers where they're at and then helping them in their journey forward, whether it is an on-premise solution or a cloud solution. And our value proposition to all of you today and to all of our customers and prospects out there is the following. We have people and experience. So we are a strong believer in hiring the right people and putting them in the right positions, and then bringing people into our culture of performance and accountability. Because if everybody in the team is not accountable, then as a whole, our company is not accountable. Then we layer that with our process excellence. So we are not just an implementer, but we are also a managed service provider. And when a customer entrusts their ERP applications to you to manage, you are taking on a huge responsibility of maintaining their environments, upgrading them, but more importantly, securing them. So we have ITIL-based processes for all of our service operations. We are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant and audited every year. We are a Oracle Cloud Service Provider certified with an external auditor every year. So we continue to maintain and grow our process excellence. And then we have expertise and credentials in a variety of areas, from systems management to application management to infrastructure and database. And that is where we bring our knowledge to bear on customer projects. And then lastly, we are acutely focused on helping our customers optimize and transform. So a lot of that is through automation, which means we're trying to reduce human effort. It could be something as simple as a workflow, something as complicated as robotic process automation with bots. It could be digital assistants, any number of things. And then for those customers who are looking to not just optimize, but also transform, they may be refactoring an application or re-architecting a solution as they migrate it from on-premise to cloud. We are helping our customers do that as well. A little bit about our service offering. So there are 5 things that we do. First is helping our customers move to the cloud. So if they're not ready, then we'll help them where they are. But if they're ready, then we can help them migrate to the cloud. We can migrate any workload in the customer's data center to the cloud. We can even migrate from other clouds, from one cloud to the other. We provide disaster recovery as a fully managed service, and that plays a really important role, especially in the context of a cyber attack. We can air gap the DR platform and application and full infrastructure stack so that whatever gets hacked in your primary system does not cross over to your DR site. We help our customers implement analytics on Oracle Analytics Cloud with Autonomous Data Warehouse. We help our customers migrate entire VMware estates to the cloud using Oracle Cloud VMware solution. And then security, the topic we're talking about today, we specialize in doing security audits. We help our customers manage and maintain network and infrastructure security. We can also implement network security, firewalls, cloud native and third party, and application and database security management. So let's take a brief primer on what cyber attacks are. So what is the definition of a cyber attack? Obviously, it's an unwelcome attempt. And the intent is to steal, expose, alter, disable, or destroy information through unauthorized access. And that is the key here. It's unauthorized access to your computer systems. And why do people do this? Most often than not, it's criminally motivated. They're trying to seek financial gain. But sometimes it could also be disgruntled current or former employees. Sometimes it could be motivated by politics or people who are fighting for a cause, for example. There could be a number of things that happen. But the important thing here is the last point, is when do cyber attacks occur? They can occur anytime, anywhere. As a matter of fact, if you happen to talk to your network security team and saw what they were seeing on the front end or the edge of your network, they're probably seeing hundreds of attacks every day on your systems. So that's how prevalent this is. That is how real this is. But the good news is there are lots of security systems already in place that are preventing these attacks from doing any damage. But it is nonstop, and it's just increasing all the time. So what do they target? Now, again, we're talking a lot about ERP today. Cyber attacks can happen anywhere. They can happen to individual consumers. Your personal identity can be stolen and things like that. But the context of today's discussion is ERP. So when you think about cyber attacks and what do they target, there are 2 things that you want to think about. One is data categories: financial data, personal data, IP data, intellectual property that you may have, research information, trade secrets, anything that is classified or secret or internal to a company that you don't want to share. And then stuff that goes in social media, again, related to a company and enterprise systems. We're not talking about consumer social media in today's conversation. But the data sources that contain these data categories could be your ERP databases. It could be associated structured or unstructured data stores, file storage devices, email, backups and archive storage, and IT infrastructure that's supporting all of these things. Some common types of cyber attacks. Again, many of these may be familiar to the audience, but in case you haven't come across all of these, I'm not going to give you definitions for each one of these. You can easily Google them and find them in the public domain. But many of these are common. I'm sure everybody has heard of what a denial of service attack is. Ransomware is in the news a lot, so is malware. But there are many other types, like a backdoor Trojan attack or a phishing attack. In our company and in many of my customer sites, we are all required to go through mandatory training, security training, to understand what phishing is, what are the different types of phishing attacks that you could be subjected to, and how you should learn to identify those coming via email or text or things like that, or even a website that may appear suspicious, right? So these are all the types of attacks that are possible, but there's some more. This is not an exhaustive list. Now let's talk about, so that was a brief primer, as I said. I kept it brief because I'm hoping that everybody understands what this is already, and this was just a quick refresher. Let me see, there's something in the chat. Yeah, that's just Stephanie. Okay, so let's talk about the impact of cyber attacks on ERP in particular, right? So the reason you want to protect your ERP from cyber attacks is you have a lot of sensitive information in those ERP systems. You have HR information, you have payroll information, you store social security numbers, you have financial data about the company, and depending on whether you're private or public, there are different levels of security that you'd apply into that. There is supply chain information, right? So think about hackers who may want to get into your supply chain and understand what your weak points are and choke those supply chain points so that you may not be able to ship product, for example. If you have customers or consumers that you deal with, let's say you are a web services company or a product company, and you have consumer data, then you may have credit card information about that consumer. So a loss of ERP, right, if there's an attack, it can really bring a business to a grinding halt. Now, we may think, well, if my HR system goes down for a day, what's the big deal? We can live without it. And that may be true. But what you may not be able to live with are the consequences of having lost that data to a bad actor, right? So they could take that data and misuse that, which means there's an immediate impact to all of your employees whose data is stolen. And sometimes you may be able to, put protective measures in place or reactive measures in place, but sometimes you cannot. So any loss of ERP data can have a significant impact both in the short term as well as the long term. So if it's not properly secured and monitored, we should understand that ERP can be vulnerable to all these types of attacks. It's not just systems that are at the edge of your network. A good example of that is last year, or maybe towards the end of last year, early this year, Kronos had a big attack. And so many customers who relied on Kronos for timesheet entries before payroll could be processed could not do anything. Most of my customers who were impacted resolved to entering manual timesheet information in their systems, which was not easy when payroll was delayed. And delaying payroll is never good, right? It has a direct financial impact on your employees. So here are some recent high-profile cyber attacks for those of you who have been paying attention to the news or who haven't. I just saw this new word in the Oxford Dictionary. It's called goblin mode. I don't know if you guys have come across this article in the news. It's been floating around. So if you've been in goblin mode, it means that you're just binge watching, TV shows, or you're fully into sports and you're not really paying attention to what's happening in the news, or you're just fed up of the news that you've tuned it off. But these are the things that have been happening in recent times. I have not put in information from 2022, but the Colonial Pipeline attack was a big one. It was in the news. And it was in the news because 45% of the gas, diesel, and jet fuel supplied to the East Coast ran through that pipeline. So you can imagine that the hackers, they do their homework, they know which targets to pick, and they know that they will be rewarded in some way or the other if they go and attack, if they're successful with those systems. The AXA insurance attack, again, was a huge one. There was a lot of loss of data. Nintendo said that cyber criminals got their hands on a lot of accounts. And my kids, I don't know about your kids, but my kids are on gaming devices a bit. They're spending money, and their accounts are vulnerable. So if their personal information is stolen at a young age, there could be severe repercussions for what happens when they go to college, when they go to work, and so on. So these are not to be taken lightly. So let's talk about some proactive measures. What can you do? I mean, it's a scary world out there, but it's not all bad. There are lots of tools that you can employ. There are lots of processes you can put in place and proactive measures you can take to prevent such attacks and prevent those dire scenarios. So let's think of this as steps that you can take to protect your ERP. They should say 6 steps instead of 7, maybe, but I'll talk about a 7th step. But let's start on the far right, on the top right, identifying all of your most important information, identifying which systems are important versus which ones are nominal, and identifying the impact levels of an attack, which means if a system is attacked, does that mean it's going to disrupt your business entirely? Does that mean it's going to make you limp along for a while until you restore it? I think that's what we mean. So there are different types of attacks. There are different impact levels of attacks. And then there are different data sources and information types that are compromised or can be compromised. So that's what we mean by identifiers. You have to build a matrix like this for this, and you have to identify these, and these should be things that should be shared with the right people in the organization so that they're aware that these are the kinds of impacts we're looking at. These are the appropriate responses that we can deliver for each of those scenarios. It starts with identification, because without that, you will not be able to build a response. The second thing below that is interfaces. So you have in your ERP systems a very tightly integrated and heavily integrated application. There are lots of data flows in and out of the system, some internal, some external. Having a good interface map and knowing the flow of information is really important. Why? Because a cyber attack on ERP may not necessarily be a direct attack on your ERP. You may actually be vulnerable if the third party or another system within your data center is attacked, and that has a link to your system, to your ERP. You could have a negative impact that way as well. So understanding the data flows, understanding who's accessing what, when, and how frequently, and whether those access points have been secured or not is really important. Now, the data flows, one way you can monitor the data flows is by routing all of your data flows through a middleware layer instead of having direct point-to-point interfaces. And the advantage for that is that you can now apply security protocols. You can monitor the flow of information at the application layer before it goes from one system to the other, and you can identify risks and take some proactive measures. Reducing vulnerability means that once you've built that interface map, once you've identified data sources, once you've put some monitors on your data flows, look at your at-risk interfaces. Absolutely no on straight FTP. If people are still doing that, that's bad practice. At a minimum, have secure FTP. Try not to have accounts that are accessing your ERP systems with direct database links where they can pull information with a query, right? And they may be able to download sensitive data. So all of those kinds of vulnerabilities you have to identify. And in some cases, you have to make some tough decisions and eliminate those at-risk interfaces. But at a minimum, if you're not able to eliminate that, apply encryption methods, secure all your entry and exit points, and understand how to isolate some of these things so that if there is an impact, you isolate that impact to a particular area, a zone, a network, a set of applications, and not let that spread throughout your environment. One way to do that is to check your backups. Now, backing up a system is good, but backing up a hacked system is not good, right? Because now your backup, even if it's encrypted and even if it's saved in a safe location, if there is some sort of malware or something like that in your system and you're backing that up, then if you ever try to restore it, you're going to reintroduce that. Although you may have removed it after scanning, if it's there in your backup, that's not a good thing. So here's where you need to think about, building an air gap from your production to your DR environment, from your production to your archive copies of your backups, where you're making sure that if something's compromised, that is not bleeding over into those standby systems and you're not completely compromised. And then the last thing is integrate and collaborate, which means that the ERP team needs to be a part of the overall cyber response team, not something that you would take as an afterthought and say, okay, this happened, the network guys are handling everything. When it's done, we'll just inform this ERP team that this happened. I think it's more critical than that. There needs to be appropriate levels of information sharing and participation by the ERP team, because that information in ERP is so critical. Okay, again, a little bit more on that. If you think about this as infrastructure, database, and application as the main layers, what are the things that you could do at the infrastructure level, at the database level, at the application level? The simple takeaway is encrypt everything. When in doubt, if somebody says, does this need to be encrypted? The answer is always yes. Encrypt everything: data at rest, data in motion, all the accounts and passwords. Put all of the right best practices in place so that at a minimum you are not finding yourself in a situation because something was not encrypted. On the database side, monitor for SQL injection type attacks and unauthorized data dumps. If you're not doing this already, there are lots of tools that are available for that, several from the database vendors themselves. Like Oracle has a tool called DataSafe that you may have heard of. Very easy to install, low cost solution, but an excellent value for the money. Enforcing password policies, enforcing change control, provisioning and deprovisioning accounts. This is really important because oftentimes hackers can use an account that belongs to an employee that's been terminated or retired, but the accounts have not been deprovisioned in a timely manner. So something you can do for prevention is obfuscation, which means in ERP, we know that we often request production to be copied to non-production environments. And there are many customers even today who are just making as-is copies of production data and putting that into a lower environment, like a non-production environment. There are business reasons they need a production copy to troubleshoot, to validate data errors and things like that, but that doesn't mean you don't have to secure it. So in a development or a test environment, always consider scrambling or masking your data. Consider subsetting your data. Why do you need a full copy of production in a development environment? Why cannot it be a small subset? So even if something was compromised, it is a much smaller data set than the entire production copy. So these are really important whenever you consider building a new development or test environment or non-production environment, or if you're refreshing, then definitely use obfuscation techniques like scrambling, masking, subsetting, and hiding. Patching. This is often overlooked. I know many of you do a good job of applying your CPU updates, but the thing about a CPU update is it has to be applied within a very short window of when it's available, from the date it's available. So if a CPU update, like Oracle's last CPU update, I think came out in October, like somewhere around the second week of October maybe. And if you wait 3 months and say, oh, I'll wait until I have 3 months until the next CPU update comes so I can apply that slowly over that period of time, then that 3 months is time that you're exposing your system to those vulnerabilities. Keep in mind that the CPU update itself is a reactionary, right? Something is identified as a potential malware or bug, and it is fixed. So that malware is already working its way through some system somewhere in the world. You know that there is a patch out for that. You cannot wait for weeks or months to apply that. You have to apply that as quickly as possible from the date it's been released. That applies not just for infrastructure, but for database and applications as well. Application code patches that are not directly related to security vulnerabilities, sure, you can decide if you want to apply them immediately or you can wait on them, that's fine. But anything that's related to CPU, critical patch updates, security-wise, you have to apply that immediately. Now, you have solutions that will do some of this automatically for you. We'll talk about that in a second. But the last thing I wanted to cover on measures you can take is reporting and analysis. So if you're in regulated industries, pharma, for example, or banking, then you have to not only do all of these things to prevent, but if there is an attack, then there are very strict rules around reporting, federal and state. So don't forget that. Reporting to CISA is really helpful because the more you share, the more everyone benefits from it. And that's how a lot of these security models are built, is by information sharing. And then everybody hardens their system and puts out new versions of software and images and things like that, make sure that these attacks don't continue to propagate. So let's think about some solutions in the cloud. And one of the things that you would find with cloud compared to on-prem, this is not necessarily a knock on on-prem solutions or in colo solutions, but cloud has an advantage in the sense that, one, it is relatively new compared to what we do on-prem, what we've been doing on-prem for decades now. And cloud has the advantage of having built from scratch, things like encryption at every layer, security rules and firewall rules, and user accounts that are now authenticated and authorized using an identity provider, not just direct application accounts or database accounts. All of these things are built into cloud services. So if you consider Oracle Cloud Infrastructure as an example, identity management, data management at the compute level, at the networking level, all of these features are built in to the cloud. So all you're doing is taking advantage of that or spinning up the service, and you get full stack encryption, you get monitoring, you get secure VPN, you get hardened compute images and triple mirroring of disks, you get key management services, you get role-based policies that you can roll out. So if somebody's only managing compute, then they don't have to have visibility into database or application layers. All of these tools are already built in, whereas in the on-prem world, customers have had to buy multiple pieces of software and stitch all that together and then manage that, which becomes a big challenge. So cloud has a way of integrating and automating security. Some of the things that you can do in the cloud world, which you may find difficult to do in the on-premise world, are the monitoring and prevention tools. So vulnerability scanning is included for free with OCI. All you do is turn it on, and it will automatically scan all of your systems and tell you where the gaps are. So if you take that CPU example, then what it's going to do is it's going to read from an online repository that says, here are the latest threats that you have to monitor for, and first scan your systems. And if you go even a day from the date that the CPU has not been applied, it's going to tell you that the CPU is available, you have not yet applied it, and that's a gap. That's a exception in your report, and you have to deal with it. So there are tools like that that just will make your life easier, that will keep you on track. And that's why we think cloud's going to be a much better place when it comes to securing your workloads. So a little bit more about cloud security. So think about security zones as guardrails that can be used to protect customer data and resources. These guardrails will prevent you from making silly mistakes when you deploy workloads in the cloud. In previous years, you would have heard of, for example, somebody left a leaky storage bucket on AWS, and there was some data sitting on that storage device, and that was compromised, right? To prevent errors like that, if you have a security zone, again, this is all OCI terminology, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, then when you go to deploy a security bucket or a storage device, and if you've not secured it properly, it will prevent you from even creating that storage device, because the security zone has some pre-built rules that you cannot sidestep or work around, right? Cloud Guard is something that you would use after you've deployed workloads. So it has things like activity monitoring and a threat detector that look at your system continuously and see if after you've deployed, if something else has changed or it's become non-compliant. We spoke about vulnerability scanning service already. So think about improving your security posture in layers, right? Starting from the infrastructure up to platform, then application, and then governance. All of these are important. It's not one versus the other. So it's not a choice. If you have enough money or resources, you are in a position today where you have to address all of these simultaneously and continuously, right? So how can Astute help? We have services for security assessments. We have implementation services. We can do pen testing. We can do vulnerability scanning. We do patching as a service. We do complete end-to-end security management in our managed service. But for those of you who don't have a starting point, maybe the assessment is a good way of getting started, whether it is for your entire stack, infrastructure, database, and application, or only database or only application, whatever your needs are, we'll be happy to work with you and help you if you need help. With that, I will pause and see if there are any questions that I can answer for you. Thank you for listening. Stephanie, I don't think there are any questions. So maybe we can...
Thank you, Arvind. Again, if you have any questions, please add them now into the question box. But if we do not have any questions, we just wanted to encourage you to look at the link that we have below. We have another session coming up soon. And we wanted to thank Arvind for his presentation. And we hope to see you at future events.